It's 7 a.m. on a Tuesday in Kharkiv. The first light breaks across a city that should have been empty by now. You would think silence would be the sound of war. But silence isn't what you hear in Kharkiv. What you hear is a diesel generator, vibrating on a sidewalk outside a basement door. The engine rumbles steadily, almost like a heartbeat. Mechanical, insistent, alive. This is the sound of Marina's bakery. Marina is 42 years old. She owns a small artisanal bakery in what used to be the safest neighborhood in Kharkiv, the Saltivka district. Now it's one of the most heavily shelled residential areas in all of Europe, but she's still here. And every morning, before the sun fully rises, that diesel generator starts running. 30 kilometers away, across fields that used to be wheat and are now trenches, the Russian border sits like a scar on the landscape. This is July 2026. The war hasn't ended. It's been nearly 4.5 years since February 24th, 2022, when Russia launched its full-scale invasion. 4.5 years of missiles, 4.5 years of air raid sirens, 4.5 years of people like Marina deciding, every single morning, whether today is the day they finally leave. They haven't left. Instead, they've done something far more remarkable. They've adapted. They've learned to live in a country where normal is measured in generator hours and power cuts, where a hot loaf of bread at 7 in the morning isn't a routine, it's an act of resistance. This is the story of Ukraine, not the Ukraine you see on the news, not the Ukraine of dramatic military victories or humanitarian crises. This is the Ukraine of daily life, of people continuing on, of ordinary humans doing impossible things in an impossible situation. This is what it actually looks like to live here right now. To understand Ukraine in July 2026, you have to first understand that the war isn't something that happened. It's something that's happening right now. Constantly, it's a living, breathing presence in every single decision people make. Over 500,000 people have been killed or wounded across both sides of this conflict. 500,000. That's not a number. That's a nation's worth of trauma. Husbands who won't come home. Wives waiting for phone calls that never arrive. Children growing up without parents. Parents burying children. The international estimates suggest Russian casualties exceed 350,000 to 400,000. Ukrainian military losses are in the tens of thousands, with tens of thousands more civilian casualties. But these are estimates. The actual numbers are locked away as state secrets. What matters is that everyone in Ukraine knows someone who's dead or missing. Everyone. A friend from school. A cousin. A neighbor's son. The war has reached into every single family in this country. There isn't a person here who hasn't been touched by it. Across Ukraine, there are approximately 6.8 million refugees scattered across the globe. They live in Poland, Germany, the UK, Canada, the United States. They carry Ukrainian passports and memories of homes they had to leave behind. They carry photos on their phones of places that don't exist anymore. They send money back to relatives who are still there. They watch the news and wait for the war to end so they can go home. But there are also 1.5 million people who have returned. They came back to cities still under bombardment. They came back to neighborhoods where their houses might not still be standing. They came back knowing the risk, knowing the danger, knowing that staying means accepting uncertainty every single day. This is the split that defines Ukraine in 2026. The people who left and the people who stayed or came back. Both choices are valid. Both carry their own trauma. But the fact that 1.5 million chose to come back says something profound about the gravitational pull of home. They came back not because it was safe. It's not safe. They came back because something else was missing. Home, family, the ability to stay would be a choice, but the inability to leave became a different kind of unbearable. In Kyiv, the capital, the surface looks almost normal. The metro runs perfectly. The stations are still those subterranean palaces of marble and mosaic that they've always been. The cafes are packed with people, students, office workers, tech professionals. The streets are clean. The infrastructure functions. But listen closely, and you'll hear it. The sirens. Multiple times a week, sometimes multiple times a day, the air raid alarm sounds across the city. Not a quiet beep, a loud, wailing, unmistakable sound that means you have minutes to find shelter. The entire rhythm of the city pauses. Whatever you're doing stops. You move to the metro. You move to a bomb shelter. You move underground because that's what keeping yourself alive means now. Then, just as suddenly, it ends. The all-clear signal sounds, and everyone emerges back to the surface and continues exactly where they left off. A man returns to his coffee. A student reopens her laptop. Someone goes back to haggling at a market stall. This happens every single day, multiple times, for nearly 4.5 years. But Kharkiv is different. Kharkiv is the eastern gateway, just 30 kilometers from the Russian border. Close enough that when the missiles come, there isn't time to react. There's less than 45 seconds from the moment an air raid siren sounds to the moment a glide bomb impacts. 45 seconds isn't time to reach a shelter. 45 seconds is time to think about your children. Time to think about whether you should have left last month when your sister moved to Lviv. 45 seconds is nearly impossible, yet the city functions. 300,000 people still live in Kharkiv. They go to work. They open shops. They rebuild what the missiles destroy. They do this knowing that tonight or tomorrow or next week another missile might come. This is the psychological reality that no headline quite captures. This is what it actually feels like to exist in a place where danger is constant but not imminent, where risk is normal, where planning your week requires checking the weather forecast and the military situation simultaneously. In late 2022, Marina's original bakery shop was destroyed, a direct hit. The building that had housed her business for 8 years simply ceased to exist. She watched it happen from a shelter. Most people would have left. Most people did leave. But Marina made a different calculation. My customers depended on my bread, she said in an interview with a journalist covering reconstruction efforts. Not because it was the best bread, because it meant Kharkiv was still alive. If everyone with any money or options left, the city would die spiritually before the Russians ever get here. She relocated to a basement. Not a nice basement. Not a basement that had been renovated or prepared. Just the concrete foundation of a building that was still mostly standing. She moved her industrial ovens down there. She connected a diesel generator the size of a refrigerator to the electrical system. The generator sits outside on the sidewalk, its engine running 8 hours a day during scheduled blackouts. Her staff works by military-grade headlamps during power cuts. They wear them like miners, the small lights attached to their heads, illuminating the dough they're kneading. The generator roars loud enough that you have to shout to be heard. The basement is warm from the ovens, humid from the steam, and it smells exactly like it should smell, like yeast and butter and wheat. Every morning at 7 a.m., that generator starts running. She sells roughly 300 loaves a day. Some days it's 1,000. When she has enough flour, when the supply lines are clear, when missiles didn't destroy the grain storage the previous week. People ask why I don't move to Lviv where it's safe, she told the same journalist, looking directly at the camera. I tell them, if we all leave, the city dies before the missiles even hit it. A hot loaf of bread at 7 a.m. tells my neighbors that Kharkiv is still standing. We bake between the sirens. It's our own way of fighting back. It's not that Ukrainians are suffering nobly. It's that they've found a way to extract meaning from staying. They've converted survival into purpose. A bakery isn't just a business. It's a statement. Every loaf of bread is a refusal. And the cost is real. Marina hasn't taken a day off in 4.5 years, not one. She's been inside 2 different bomb shelters during actual strikes. She's seen buildings she knew collapse into rubble. She's watched the city get smaller as neighborhoods became uninhabitable. But she still bakes. The generation holding the future. Artem is 23 years old. He's a UI and UX designer for a European logistics company. He works remotely from a cafe in Kiev, the same cafe he's worked from for the past 3 years. He represents something important about Ukraine right now. A generation that's trying to exist in the future while dealing with a constant present danger. His daily routine goes like this. He wakes up, checks his phone for news about air raid alerts. He heads to the cafe at around 9 in the morning. He carries a 40,000 milliamp hour power bank and an EcoFlow portable power station in the trunk of his car. These aren't luxuries. These are requirements. The cafe has backup power, but that power has limits. If the grid drops for an extended blackout, his work can't continue without those batteries. He has European clients. He has deadlines. A blackout can't stop him because he can't afford to lose the job. The job is what keeps him from leaving Ukraine. His friends talk about moving to Berlin, or Warsaw, or London. Somewhere that doesn't have air raid sirens. Somewhere you can plan a future without checking casualty reports and missile strike patterns first. But Artem stays, not because he's particularly brave, but because everything he built is here. His apartment, his clients, his relationships, and because leaving would mean accepting that Ukraine lost him to this war, even if he's not fighting. Among young Ukrainians like Artem, there's a specific slang that's emerged during the war years. They use the word Trivoha, which means air raid alert, but they use it casually, like talking about the weather. Mate, did Did you hear the Trevoha last night? It's become almost banal, the way you might ask if it rained. When power cuts disrupt plans, young people use the phrase, life according to the schedule, meaning your entire day is now dictated by when the grid is scheduled to be dark. Meetings get moved, dates get rearranged. Everything revolves around the power cut schedule. The nightclubs have changed too. The electronic dance raves that used to be the center of Kyiv's youth culture have mostly disappeared. Instead, they've converted to daytime charity auctions and comedy shows that raise funds directly for tactical medical supplies and drone parts. Artem has been to 3 of them. He bought supplies once, advanced tourniquets and compression bandages. He knows people who need them. Friends who were on the front lines, classmates who didn't make it back. This is the psychological reality for a generation that grew up with peace and now exists in a war they didn't choose but can't escape. The cities at different distances. Ukraine's cities exist in concentric circles of danger. The closer you are to the Russian border, the more immediate and constant the threat. Lviv is in the northwest, far from the front lines. It's beautiful. Medieval architecture, tree-lined streets, cafes with wine lists. It's the gateway city where Western diplomats and aid workers arrive. Real estate prices have skyrocketed there because every business from the east that could afford to relocated there. It's a city that's physically safe but economically transformed. Kiev is in the north, the capital, physically intact but constantly under threat from long-range missiles. You can live a relatively normal life there if you're willing to accept frequent interruptions for air raid shelters. Then there's Odessa, the coastal city, the economic artery of Ukraine. Despite the UN grain deal collapsing, Odessa found a different solution. It created its own unilateral Black Sea shipping corridor that hugs the coasts of NATO members Romania and Bulgaria. Boats travel in the shallow waters along those coastlines, protected by geography and NATO presence. The beaches are closed. Sea mines make swimming a death sentence. But the port is operational, and that means the grain still flows. That means the economy still functions. Then there's Kharkiv, and Kharkiv is something else entirely. Kharkiv exists in a state of constant active emergency. The city built the world's first fully underground school system. Classes happen in metro stations. Purpose-built bunkers house classrooms. Kindergartens operate in concrete reinforced underground spaces. Teachers lead children through lesson plans while the city above is under bombardment. Windows throughout the city are permanently boarded with plywood, not temporarily. Permanently, because replacing them is pointless. They'll just get shattered again. Businesses operate anyway. Shops open in the morning and close before dark. Some have no front windows anymore, just plywood facades with doors cut into them. You walk through the dark entrance into a storefront lit by flashlights and battery-powered lamps. And yet, people work. People shop. People live. The infrastructure of survival, how they actually adapt. What makes Ukraine different from what people expect is that the country hasn't collapsed into chaos. Instead, it's built new systems around the war. The power situation is critical. Following waves of targeted drone and missile strikes on thermal, hydro, and generation infrastructure through 2024 and 2025, Ukraine entering mid-2026 relies heavily on nuclear power plants, European grid imports, and thousands of decentralized generators. Rolling blackouts are a scheduled part of normal life now, but they're scheduled. That's the key. The National Power Company publishes blackout schedules. You know exactly when your neighborhood will lose power. From 2 p.m. to 10 p.m., from midnight to 8 a.m. This allows people to plan, to charge devices before the blackout, to cook before the blackout, to live around the blackout. The railway system is a marvel. Despite being repeatedly targeted, the Ukrainian rail network maintains a 90% on-time rate. When electrical overhead lines are bombed, they instantly deploy vintage diesel and steam locomotives to pull passenger trains. There are actual steam trains running across Ukraine in the 2026. It's like traveling through time while traveling through space. The government app called Dia is arguably the most impressive infrastructure. It's a digital government portal that holds your digital passport, driver's license, property records, and vehicle registration. But during the war, it evolved into something more. Citizens can report damage to their homes through the app, file for state aid, request reconstruction assistance. It's a direct connection between individual need and government response. Internet is incredibly robust. Ukraine is one of the most digitized nations on Earth, and that digitization has saved the country. Starlink terminals and localized fiber optic lines that don't require central power infrastructure mean internet remains active during blackouts. A kid in a basement bunker in Kharkiv can still attend online school. A programmer in a cafe can still work for a European company. The digital infrastructure is almost indestructible. And then there's the most remarkable adaptation, the relocation of entire industries. Over 1,000 large-scale manufacturing businesses physically moved their machinery from the eastern regions to western areas like Zakarpattia and Lviv. Imagine dismantling a factory, loading it onto trains, moving it hundreds of kilometers away, re-establishing it in a new location. Doing this for over 1,000 businesses. They did this so production could continue, so people could have jobs, so the economy wouldn't completely collapse. This is what the headlines miss. Ukraine didn't surrender, didn't curl up and wait for this to end. Instead, the entire nation reorganized itself around survival and continuation. The broken cities, what war actually looks like. Mariupol was a city of about 500,000 people before the war. It was a thriving port city on the Sea of Azov. Beautiful neighborhoods, modern infrastructure. People had dreams about the future. They planned businesses. They raised children. They expected peace. During the siege in 2022, it was surrounded for 82 days. The bombardment that followed was among the heaviest of any modern conflict. Entire neighborhoods disappeared under sustained artillery fire. Bodies were buried in mass graves because there was no time for proper funerals. Mariupol is now 80 to 90% destroyed. The scale of destruction is incomprehensible if you haven't seen it. Not just buildings damaged, not just infrastructure broken, but entire blocks erased from existence. Streets that used to have shops and cafes and apartment buildings now exist as piles of rubble and dust. The city doesn't look abandoned. It looks deleted. It remains under Russian occupation. The original Ukrainian structures are being systematically demolished and replaced with generic Soviet-style apartment blocks. There's a particular cruelty to this. It's not just military occupation, it's cultural erasure. It's the physical erasure of a Ukrainian city being replaced with a Russian one. The Azovstal steel plant, which was the focus of the final battle, is now a rubble field. The soldiers who defended it fought in its corridors and tunnels for months. Some survived. Many didn't. The plant itself is now a graveyard of twisted metal and concrete. The original population is largely displaced or replaced by workers from the Russian Federation. Mariupol is becoming a Russian city, not through conquest, but through erasure and replacement. This is what complete defeat looks like. Not just military defeat, but cultural death. An entire city being rewritten. An entire history being erased. But even then, stories emerge. Reports of resistance, underground networks, people refusing to collaborate with occupation authorities, sabotage of reconstruction efforts, the human spirit refusing to accept erasure even when the physical city has been erased. Mariupol serves as a dark mirror. It shows what happens if Ukraine loses completely. It shows what's at stake. Every other city, Kharkiv, Kiev, Odessa, fights knowing this is the alternative. Complete erasure, cultural death. This is why Marina bakes bread. This is why Artem codes. This is why people return despite the missiles. Because the alternative is Mariupol. Conclusion. What comes next this is the story of Ukraine in July of 2026. Not the headline version, not the simplified version, the actual, complex, messy version. It's a story of a country that's been hit repeatedly, broken in places, displaced millions of people, lost hundreds of thousands to war, and yet still functions. Still has people baking bread and writing code and raising children and planning futures. The war isn't over. It might end in a year. It might continue for a decade. No one knows. But what's clear is that Ukraine and Ukrainians have already won something important. They've proven that they won't disappear. They won't surrender to erasure. Marina still bakes. Artem still codes. Millions of people still live. The cities still function. The trains still run. The gardens still grow. This is remarkable not because it's heroic, though it is. It's remarkable because it's ordinary. Because people are doing ordinary things in extraordinary circumstances. And by doing so, they're keeping Ukraine alive. That's not victory. But it's not defeat either. It's survival. It's continuation. It's the quiet, daily refusal to give up. And that might be the most powerful statement of all.